Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage. In this thrilling episode of the 377 Small Block Chevy Chronicles, we attempt to make oil pressure and shove an intake manifold on it. So, that being said, let's go. Here's my oil pump primer setup. You can build your own primer out of a distributor housing and a shaft with the gear removed. You cannot use, with any great success, just the rod that drives the oil pump that doesn't have an aluminum piece, or your distributor housing that fits in the block down near the camshaft, to distribute the oil down the cam tunnel. You'd have a massive leak without either that adapter that's part of my oil pump primer or a distributor housing, because that redistributes the oil. And in fact, a lot of aftermarket distributors have an O-ring upper and lower to help seal off that passage. The primer itself originally had just a shaft that stuck out and you clamp your drill chuck on it. That's great until the drill slips and that rains metal down into your engine, especially without this half an intake I got bolted on there, which kind of deflects that debris. So I've welded a nut on there, and I use a socket. In this case, I have a drill with a socket adapter. You can use an impact, but you're going to listen to the thing impacting probably, because the oil pump has quite a bit of resistance. In this case, you can go nice and slow, and that's about all it takes to make 60 pounds. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I've moved the gauge where you can see it, and I run it till I get oil dripping out of all the rockers. In this case, I have the engine at 10 degrees before top dead center, where I'm going to put the distributor in, and I have not had to rotate the engine to get oil out of all 16 rockers. She's bleeding just fine. It takes initially almost a full minute to get full oil and all the air worked out of everything, including filling the oil filter the whole way, so don't get nervous if it doesn't happen right away. So first I'm going to use my drill nice and slow. If you watch the gauge, I mean, look at how slow it's going. That's 55, that's 60. And there's oil dripping out of all the rockers. I don't want to paint the ceiling, so I'm not going to spin it much faster, but you could. It'll go higher if you wanted to. But here's a fun trick. Take a speed handle. Watch the gauge. I mean, look. You can actually hear the oil working this way. Without the drill motor, you can hear it squirting out. I got it coming out of all the rockers right now. I mean, barely turning this 60 pounds. So that works too, if you don't have a cordless drill or a powered drill. I had originally bought Lucas 30 weight break-in oil when I was going to assemble this engine with a flat tappet camshaft. And it's still relevant, even though I don't have to break in my camshaft. One, it's used, and two, it's a roller. But I have it, so I went ahead and put 5-ish quarts of that in, dumped it in yesterday, and I finished off the bottle of EOS. Now, in the last video, I questioned what EOS stood for, and I was the first to comment on my own video. My guess is engine oil supplement, even though nowhere on the bottle it's EOS assembly lubricant. Nowhere does it say engine oil supplement, even though I guess it is. And that makes sense. You know, EOS assembly lubricant. So, whatever. It was good interaction. It's always good to get, you people talking back and forth. It's good for everybody. So, and I had 1 quart of just Lucas 530 sitting on the bench that was brand new. It's one of the quarts one of the guys at the transfer station gave me the other day, or a couple months ago. And I figure the pan with the oil filter is about 7 quarts, and I'm actually going to run it with this oil, at least if I run it on the break-in stand. I've been wanting to build a break-in stand, and I haven't. It's weird just, usually I'm in front of the camera, but I'll just move my hand so you know I'm still here. So I may actually build it run-in stand, but if I put my dual quad manifold on, and once you put fuel in the carburetors, you got to make, some contingencies of getting it back out. You can't just leave it sitting in there. So should I run it on my dual quad setup, I will have to work that in, or by the time I go to put it in the car and run it, it may not, I'll be overhauling the carburetors. So there's always something to consider beyond what's happening right now. If you remember, I cut the corners off the pan and welded it back up. It's nice 24 hours later that it's not running onto the floor. And I was mentioning twice Lucas Oil Products, and this is the first time I've ever bought any of this stuff. So I got 1 quart given to me, and I bought the break-in oil because it was the most reasonably priced in the 5-gallon bucket. Because I have a couple engines to use it on, and may not be necessary, but it certainly doesn't hurt, like I said. A quick recap of the 377 up to this point. It's a 2-bolt main, 400 small block Chevrolet block with a Scat 350 crankshaft in it. To do that, you have to run a bearing spacer or a thick main bearing, because the journal on a 400 is bigger than the rest of the small blocks. I chose the thick bearings. They're made by Clevite. I think my brother had a set for this engine. I bought a second set for the 421. I found them to be on the loose side. This is a loose 2.5 thousandths on the mains. I spoke to Clevite about it. They said they shoot for 3 thousandths because that bearing's extra thick and expansion, blah, blah, blah. He said, don't worry about it. And after running the oil pressure up for the first time, I'm pretty happy. It's a Melling 1055 pump that has a nice bolt-on pickup for an 8-inch oil pan. That all worked out perfect. You don't have to braze anything or TIG weld or make brackets for the pickup. It's not going to fall off. It's bolted on. It is a standard pressure, high volume, and again, no worries about the old wives' tale of pumping the pan dry. I have extra capacity. With the oil filter, I'm going to have at least 8. I could probably squeak 9 quarts into the engine. So, and at most, I'm only going a quarter mile at a time at high RPM. So, no worries there. I got excited after checking the oil pressure while the intake's off. I also I'm going to hook a battery up to the starter that's already bolted to the block. I got to come up with a flywheel or a flex plate. Maybe I'll just crank it by hand. But I want to make sure, again, these are used lifters. I want to make sure that nothing strange is going on. I have compression in all the cylinders. So I'll probably just do it by hand. I bought spark plugs yesterday. I thought I had already bought some, but if I did, they were probably not a resistor plug. And this vehicle, the 2 vehicles I have in mind this might go in, might have a radio someday. So I wanted a resistor spark plug. I like NGK plugs. These and most aftermarket cylinder heads, including my LS now, takes a 750 reach, 0.750, 3/4 of an inch reach gasketed spark plug. So that's a whole series by itself. Little quick research now. I was laughing with my buddy Charlie. In my mind, I mean, a $1 a piece spark plug used to be the best ones out there. Nowadays, if you're lucky, you get them for $5 or $6 a piece. That's the world we live in. But they go by 2 different numbers. NGK does a BKR7E, so it's a resistor plug, heat range number 7. Good place to start. They also go by 4644. These are 4-packs. So before I screw those in, I will check compression, like I mentioned. But I got all excited. And I went and I stripped the carburetors off my Offenhauser dual quad manifold. I found my chrome oil fill nozzle, drove that in. I've always wanted an engine with one of these. Just for kicks, I set it on the heads, and guess what? I'm looking at the ports, the top of the intake ports. That's not going to work. I'd matched up a stock gasket would fit on the intake. A 1206 fits pretty good on the head. Velcro gasket. That's pretty much the standard for aftermarket manifolds before you go crazy big. And sadly, my dream is dead. This manifold is not going to work on this engine with these heads. I'm not taking the heads off. So now, I got to go to plan B. I don't know what plan B is. I have other intakes. Probably nothing exotic looking. It's probably going to be a single 4-barrel. I'll spin the camera around and I'm staring right at the manifold I'd bought for the 421, but now I have different choices for that. You know, as the time goes on, you collect more parts. So let me grab the camera. I'll show you the problem with the manifold and head intersection and some of the choices I might make. I might sleep on it. Maybe I'll come up with something else. I love tunnel rams and dual carbs, but for this particular this engine, I want this just to be a fun street motor, and a tunnel ram would be, but I don't want a hole in the hood of whatever it's going in. So, let me grab the camera. I'll be back. This was going to be so cool. I've been looking forward to it for years, and you can see that's a problem. Just by holding the gasket up to each manifold, there's hope it's going to work, but when you actually set it in the V of the block and put bolts in it, that's probably going to be a vacuum leak, if not immediately, soon enough. So a quick scan around the room. This Edelbrock manifold would work, but I have heads to match it. Probably going on the 421 if I don't come up with a big tunnel ram. This old school piece probably had the same problem at the head because when it was built, big ports didn't exist. On the end is a nice polished Edelbrock street tunnel ram. I don't know if the ports would fit. I haven't tried it. Next to that's a big block. These two dirty manifolds, a dual plane small block. That is a Victor Jr. That would be high enough port-wise to fit. This covered up is an, oh my God, American-made version of this imported manifold. This thing is huge. This is like a $120 manifold. And I bought it for the 421 on a weak moment. I wanted to see what it looked like. There's no marking on it, which I like. So nobody else knows how cheap it is unless they really study it. And same for the Proform carburetor. I found that on a deal, so I guess this might get the nod, but I'm probably going to sleep on it, and I'll get back to you. Well, that is the ebb and flow of progress. We had some highs, we had some lows. Now it's raining. There's your weather report. It's going to rain all night long. It's dark and gray, and my manifold doesn't fit. But when we come back, something will be sitting here, and I'll have the valve covers on. If I can find a distributor, I'll have plug wires and everything, I hope. That's the next logical steps. But who knows what lies in wait. So, have a nice evening. Catch you soon.